Jerry Sisk, co-founder of JTV and a man known and loved by many of you. To me, he was more like a father. In the early days of JTV, he took many of us under his wing, mentoring and inspiring us every day. Through it all, he worked on what would be his most challenging and rewarding project, the Sisk Gemology reference. But before we move forward and discuss this premier gemological book series, we need to go back and talk about the man behind it, Jerry Sisk.
Jerry was the best guy I've ever seen on TV, okay?
Folks, all right, what are we gonna do? They want my tie? Really want my tie?
Buddy, that's it.
Hey, folks, get a shot of this. Look, where'd my, lost my mic. Now I want you to see, this is my polar bear tie.
Well, I have a lot of memories about Jerry. Obviously, I traveled around to every trade show you can probably think of. When I first started working here in 1997, Jerry was my teacher.
Jerry was a gem geek. He was the most approachable, funny, down-to-earth, like totally anybody could talk to him. He would sit down with you and spend time to talk to you about whatever it is.
It was very, very distracting sometimes just engaging Jerry in a casual conversation, because if you were walking by with just one interesting little bit of information, that could lead to a 2, 3, or 4 hour conversation.
So whenever I had to go to a party, and this is pre-JTV too, I'm sort of introverted, and Jerry was a pretty large extrovert. And so I would always just call Jerry and make sure he would come along with me. And then I knew he would be the life of the party, and I could then cruise along and be happy. So Jerry was just a phenomenal person. Everybody loved him.
He and I would fight all the time. We could argue about whether the sky was blue. But then we'd get teary-eyed and make up, and we would go on. But Jerry was phenomenal. I mean, if it hadn't been for that over-the-top personality, I don't think we would be here, because he was just so special.
Jerry was a Renaissance man, but Jerry was also very approachable. Jerry could be a friend to anybody, and going over to his house for dinner and throwing a steak on the grill, you know, enjoying fine cuisine, or at a cruise. I know he'd like to go on cruises with Karen.
And he was funny, and he was very smart, and he always had his head in a book, always. We would all be laughing and having fun, but he always had his head in a book.
He could be in Tanzania and in the mines, or with the villagers, and equally at home with someone in Japan or someone in an opera in New York.
He is JTV to me. He was like my dad, you know.
My fondest memory of Jerry is when he came after me because I had a Darth Maul Band-Aid on my finger on there.
Every year for my birthday, he would always send me flowers on the set and say, "Happy birthday, love your father."
I never found Jerry intimidating, because, you know, Jerry was always smiling. You always saw him smiling.
And then every year for his birthday, I would call him no matter where he was. He was usually in Tucson because it was February 4th. It was his birthday. And I would call him and I would sing to him, because I have an awesome voice. Happy birthday, dear Jerry. Happy birthday to you.
This is really heavy. In case you're wondering, I don't want to go swimming with these around my neck. I'll go straight down.
One of the things that made Jerry so passionate about gemstones was his love of teaching, his love of learning, and his love of sharing knowledge.
He was a student constantly. So every time I went in his office, there was a microscope going over here, there were specimens over here, there was a book open here.
I came to Jewelry Television, and Jerry took me under his wing and taught me about gemstones and instilled in me a love and a passion for gems.
As years went on, Jerry taught me more and more and more about gems, about buying gems, about the gem business, about bringing the world and passion and love of gems to the world.
I was quite taken aback about his passion and his knowledge. So, of course, I'd lay out a whole series of gemstones. We'd look around, and he'd know every item. He'd know where it came from. He'd know all about it. And he'd ask those questions that were often difficult.
He was just so passionate about gemstones. Gemstones was his children. All the gemstones was his children. I used to refer to it as that, too.
He was such a remarkable individual. His love and his passion for gemstones and his ability to bring all that love and passion to the world and really create an entire generation of people that knew and loved and understood and wanted to learn more about gemstones.
Jerry could hold a gemstone in his hand and talk to you about it, and that was it. You were in love with this gemstone.
I come in to meet Jerry, you know, I knew the name. I sat down with him. We shake hands, we start chatting, where you from, where you been doing, etc. That was probably 30 seconds. From then on, gemstones for an interview.
And then all of a sudden he'd stop, and he would stop so quickly, you thought, what's he gonna say? What's he gonna say? And he'd be so excited. I remember the first time I saw him do that, it was over a fire opal. And it was something in that fire opal he'd never seen before. And he was so passionate about it, he couldn't wait to tell other people about it.
That was 14 years ago. I can still hear him.
You know, Jerry was so passionate. And I think if he looked at this book, he would see his passion realized. And I think very few people get to really see that.
And that's one of the things I really love about the Sisk Gemology reference, and something that I've enjoyed going through it. It's like getting to have an extended conversation with Jerry over and over again.
Jerry brought the best out of everybody. You know, I was a pretty good buyer before I came here, but, you know, with Jerry's mentoring, I became way better than I ever thought I could be.
We're surrounded by Tanzanite dealers, rough dealers, and Tanzanite.
Jerry would buy more gems than any gem dealer really, I think, had ever done before, and in a format like that. I mean, there were some trips where we would go to look at a particular lot of gems, and we would settle on the price, and then Jerry would call up his partner Bill and Bob and say, okay, we just bought all these blue diamonds, wire in $3.5 million. And they went, what? Because no one does that sort of stuff in the gem business, but Jerry did, and because of that, wherever he went, and particularly if it was a trade show like Tucson or any of the major trade shows, Hong Kong, anywhere, people would see Jerry and they'd instantly run to him because Jerry had the capacity to buy more gems than anybody they had ever met or ever heard of.
So we went from, you know, early days when we had to drive and get stuff to going to Tucson and people chasing Jerry down. It then became important for us to try to measure his time because he would sit and talk to the first person kind of for the whole show.
And he could basically set the pricing of a gemstone by what he believed he should pay for it. He was that persuasive. So he'd come up and say, the guy'd be like, I want $10 for that. And he'd be like, no, I'll give you $1. That's all it's worth. It's worth $1. That's it. That's all I'm going to pay you. And then the next thing you know, he'd walk away, and that would be the new price for the gemstone, you know.
Just for kicks, market track it and show this piece later on.
You know, when it gets to Jaipur, I'll show you, you know, how it
We'll
comes
give you
out.
premium for that one.
Thanks.
Well, he was just a very persuasive and a very educated and skilled at presenting his case and, you know, in presenting gemstones.
I think that when you take a very smart individual and you combine him with the beauty and wonders of the earth, you have a magic combination.
Jerry was a very hard worker. I mean, he had the capacity and the stamina to work for weeks at a time, you know, 16, 18-hour days, and just work. And it was his love and his passion for what he was doing that gave him that energy and that drive.
The last step in an incredible journey from Tanzania to Jaipur and eventually to America. 3 amazingly beautiful stones from beginning to end.
Jerry was and continues to be a giant, I would say. He was, to my knowledge, the very first person to sell a gemstone, to talk about a gemstone on television. Very first. And because of that, he really brought gems to the world, certainly to the United States. But, you know, it's gone so far beyond that. He's a leader in the industry. He's been recognized by the industry. Jerry really, on all levels, he was great.
And we saw some giraffes, wild giraffes on the way. Also, Maureen says, look, ostriches. Four large, you know, African ostriches are there. So you never know what you're going to see here. This is truly wild Africa.
Keep watching for more exclusive behind-the-scenes looks into the unprecedented Sisk Gemology Reference Book Series.